Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the third installment of my rewatches of the Phantasm films as I try to make a bit more sense of them. Because though I have always enjoyed them, there were various aspects of them that never really made sense to me. Whether they were left this way intentionally, to be intentionally vague and kind of open to interpretation, or there were just aspects which simply went over my head and I never really, noticed before. I've covered the first two, so if you haven't seen them, be sure to, go back and check out those videos. And I'm now on to Phantasm 3, Lord of the Dead, from 1994.
Who has the balls to call themselves the Lord of anything, huh? Come on. Last time somebody called himself Lord on this planet, he got crucified, Michael, okay? And we know where the hammer and the nails are.
A very simple synopsis came across, only states, Mike and Reggie continue to hunt the mysterious tall man, discovering along the way that the invasion has already begun. So this video may be a little bit short compared to the other two, as this entry seemed to be much more easy for me to follow. But there were some things at the beginning that were a bit strange, such as they retell some of parts 1 and 2 to kind of bring us back up to speed for part 3. Again with the dream stuff, Jody dying in a car wreck and so on from part 1. And of course the beginning of part 2 showing what was supposed to be kind of like this dream or something in Mike's head as he was in this mental institute of Reggie saving him. Seems like they just made that part real, rather than how in the beginning of part 2, actually took place. Because at the beginning of part 2, he's telling it like this is just a dream, none of it was real. But then of course he gets out and he's digging up those graves. Go ahead and check out that previous video. But so it seems like they really tried to clear up what had happened at the beginning of part 2, and it lays out like this. Part 1, most of it was a dream. Jody died in a car accident. The beginning of part 2 was not a dream he was telling while in a mental institute, where he's out, Reggie finds him, they go to his house, but it's blown up. Instead, all of that beginning stuff really happened. And then the rest of part 2 was fine. It happened as we saw it on screen, and that just kind of brings us up into part 2. So now we are getting away from the tall man and his little minions after that car wreck at the end of part 2. But Reggie threatens to blow them all up, and since the tall man needs Mike whole, he lets them go only to try to kind of get at them later. So now we really get into part 3 as it works in kind of like a more and more linear way, I felt. After the accident, Mike's in a coma. He sees Jody in this dreamlike afterlife situation here, and he comes back where the tall man minions, this case it was a nurse, are basically coming after Mike. They escape, they go to Reggie's house. Now this is kind of confusing because his house blew up in part 2. But anyways, Jody's spirit is there and he inhabits or turns into one of the silver balls. Again, very confusing. But then the tall man shows up, takes Mike, kind of disables that Jody ball, so it's just this little chunk that's not even floating around. And Reggie's now heading down to track down Mike with the disabled Jody ball. Yes, we've seen it all before. I'm kidding. Anyways, and also, Reggie has another CUDA, this time a soft top. I'm not sure where that one came from because I know the second one was destroyed, or in the second film, his CUDA was destroyed. But anyways, another weird setup which tries to clarify some of the things from the first film, from the first 2 films, to kind of bring us onto track here and get us, something that's a little bit easier to make sense of. So we got this road trip to track down Mike. He has a disabled Jody ball that at times kind of guides him, almost like a magic 8 ball in a way. He teams up with a kid whose family was taken out as a tall man has been going from town to town, kind of wiping them out. And of course, he also meets this woman named Rocky, who was in a similar situation where her town was kind of taken apart as well. It's all pretty straightforward. And of course, we get more of Reggie just really wanting some action.
Hey, loosen up a little. Ever try vanilla?
So, we get some more cool stuff thrown in. Of course, like we find out this weakness of the tall man, that the cold can really affect him. And that Mike now has a ball kind of inside of his head. It's very weird, very twisted. This weird horror road trip of, for most of this, get a lot of action, gore, a really cool showdown and so on, but nothing that was too hard to understand now that that beginning portion was out of the way. It kind of felt like with this one, they were really trying to tie up some loose ends from parts 1 and 2 and those weird interpretations from the ending of part 1, beginning of part 2 especially. But what we get is, another weird ending, of course, that leaves it open for another sequel in that Reggie is covered in several of those silver balls kind of pinned up to the corner of the room. and the kid who was kind of helping him out gets grabbed at the end through the glass, similar to how Mike was grabbed at the ending of the first film. So okay, nice cliffhanger, and then we'll go on to part 4. But my overall thoughts here are that it's confusing at the beginning still, particularly after seeing parts 1 and 2 pretty close to this. I'm sure if it had been a couple of years since I'd seen part 2, this little catch up for part 3 would have gone just fine. But they seem to really try to get things back on track, so it kind of makes more sense. We get the good road trip stuff, the gore, the action. We get some cool, interesting characters. Rocky was really cool, especially. Even that kid was really cool. I'm still holding on to the idea that they're kind of in like an alternate dimension, or they're hopping from one reality to another, or one dream to another, kind of happening throughout, especially, these first 3 films. Because of the things from part 1 that didn't really make much sense to me, some of the things about the beginnings of part 2, and the stuff that they kind of change as they are retelling some of those at the beginning of part 3. It kind of gives me a through line to think about for these stories. It's been a little while since I've seen parts 4 and 5, so it'll be interesting to see how those are laid out, if they're going to follow a more linear path, where we can kind of find like a through line for all of this. But that's all I got for this one. Told you it's going to be a bit of a short one. But what about you? What are your thoughts on this? Are you very familiar with part 3? What do you think about it as an entry in this series as a whole? And is there anything about that beginning and what they tried to retell about parts 1 and 2 that didn't make sense, or how do you interpret it? Anyways, sound off in the comments and let me know what you think, and I will see you in the next one for part 4.